Welcome back to the Ministry Without Hating It podcast, a ministry of Odyssey Haven Coaching and Counseling dedicated to the pursuit of answering the question, is it possible to do ministry without hating it? We have a theory that it just might be. I'm Chad Garrison. That's Brenton Hill.
Yep, that's me.
That's you. And today we are joined by now frequent guest, but also our friend, BrianJames McMahon. Welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you. I love doing this with you guys.
Oh,
This is to me ministry without hating it is this.
Oh,
I agree.
Episode over. Great.
Yeah.
So we answered that one real fast. So we've had the privilege of hosting you a few times, and the most recent episode centered around soul care of the ministry leader. But this season, we're partnering with you for some episodes that are centered around your Brave Conversations webinar. So can you take just a moment to share what that is and who it's for?
Yeah. So part of what brings us into such symmetry is I too long to see pastors flourish and love what they do. And over the years have come to the disappointing conclusion that much of what causes pastors to not enjoy pastoring is the humans that are involved in it. And as a result, what my focus is, right, as I say, they're like, yeah, that holds up. Like, find me what causes weariness, burnout. So much of it has to do with human-to-human relationships. And so the central point of the work that we do at Church Wilco is really helping us reimagine our human relationships with one another as the people of God, that we might flourish into the fullness of all God has for us. So part of that is we do a monthly free webinar for pastors, for lay leaders, people who are actively engaging some sort of community leadership role within their context, and engage specific conversations that have to do with how we do human-to-human relationships. So sometimes it's taking a topic and exploring it and unpacking it a little bit more. Sometimes it's bringing in some communal practices that we think would actually allow communities to flourish, to deepen, to strengthen in their own relationships. And so the Brave Conversations, we tag them that way because if we're going to engage in human-to-human relationships, it's probably going to require a little bit of bravery for us to do so. And we want to invite people to engage and wrestle, not just informationally, but in a little bit more of a conversational and relational context.
Yeah. And so you are hosting these things. This takes place monthly. Is that?
Yeah, monthly, Tuesday nights, the second Tuesday of every month.
Okay. So, and I know that you have, there's like a broader theme over almost like a quarterly type of a thing.
Yes.
And then you kind of dive in deeper within each one.
Yeah, because the idea for us is I don't want to dump too much information too quickly because we live in a society where we have access to all the information and yet are not transformed. And so part of it is how do we break apart larger topics into smaller places where we can go from information to an experience and into relationship. And so for Q1 of this year, the topic is relational and emotional safety. And we're talking about like, what does that look like and what does that mean? And so we just do a little bit of content each of those webinars and then we wrestle with it together. And so each quarter there's a broad topic and then each month is a sub piece of that broader topic.
Well, that's a great segue then, and that's what we're centering this episode around is the subject of relational safety. So, what is that, and why does that matter to you so much?
So it's been quite a journey for me in exploring the distinction between the elements of our experience that exist within us and the elements of our experience that exist between us. And I think a lot of times when we're thinking about relationships, the way we move through the world, what pain feels like, we're often paying attention to the things that I feel internally to myself, that I feel like unworthy or not good about myself, or I'm a bad person. There's this pain that sits that like has something to do with my sense of self and who I am. And as I became a therapist and started to explore, particularly was the theoretical lens of restoration therapy, it really drew a distinction between how we experience ourselves and how we experience one another. And this really opened up my eyes to thinking back through years of ministry experience of the moments that broke down in community and relationship were often not just moments I felt a certain way about me, but I experienced something that happened in the relationship between us. And so when we're talking about relational and emotional safety, we're actually talking about how secure or insecure do we feel in the relationship as a whole. Not how confident am I about myself, but can I trust you? Can you trust me? What's the trust level in the relationship? And one is just a topic that I didn't hear talked about all that much in the church, because we talk about getting our identity changed and right coming to know God differently, and then we know ourselves differently. And there weren't a lot of conversations to say, how do we know one another differently? And as I started to dive into that, to say, oh, so much breakdown in our church contexts, so much of the pain experienced by pastors actually has to do with the relational dynamic that exists between two people. So that kind of launched me in my journey, both clinically, but also in the work that I do with Church Wellco, engaging pastors and leaders.
So you had shared with me a blog post that you'd written on this, and there was something that actually jumped out to me, and I think we can maybe kind of go from here and unpack. But one of the things that stood out, you actually mentioned that safety must not be declared. And when I think of how often, it's fascinating to me because I think of how often even I say, and sometimes it's joking, this is a safe space. You can trust me. This is, but you're saying that's not something that you can actually just, because I said so. Pull that out.
Correct, because actually the declaration that something is safe actually inherently makes it less safe immediately. Because it disallows me from actually going, you might feel safe, but I don't feel safe. Right. So if we break it apart, the building blocks of relational and emotional safety have to do with openness, predictability, and a fair and balanced system. So this openness being this idea that we can talk about anything, that I'm not going to get in trouble for asking a question, that we just have, there's an openness to what is available to be talked about. Predictability is there's a consistency in how I experience you and how you experience me. In the fair and balanced system is there actually are rules, and they get applied fairly and very biblical in the sense that we don't show favoritism, that what it is, and the more predictability and openness and balance in the system, it actually allows our bodies in a way to exhale, to say, okay, I'm good. I know what to expect. I know how to operate. I can reliably anticipate how you're going to treat me. So I don't need to remain vigilant to make sure that I am safe. That I would actually say in many ways at its core, the experience of safety is the absence of vigilance. That I can truly, fully be present here with you in this moment, not having to keep the tension of being prepared to protect myself. And because of that, safety is something I experience and you experience and we experience together. But what causes my vigilance and what causes your vigilance might be very different things. And so I do a soapbox with this with all the clinicians that I train, because even therapists, pastors, we all want to do this. We want to be safe people. We like to think that we are safe. And actually, oftentimes we do become very safe for many people. But if you enter my space and I make the statement that says, hey, you're safe here, I don't know who I remind you of that actually may not have been safe to you. I don't know what the rules that you've operated by, that by coming into my office or to a conversation with me, I'm going to change the rules on you. You're not going to know what to expect. You're not going to know how to predict it. You don't know what we do or don't get to talk about. So actually entering relationship is inherently unsafe. And anytime we change the relationship, we start a new friendship, we add a new person to a friend group, it becomes less safe temporarily because we lose the predictability of knowing what to expect. And so I would argue safety, we've got some reactivity around safety, as if we think that something being unsafe is therefore bad and terrible, that actually safety is a byproduct, that we don't feel secure yet in the relationship because the things necessary for that security haven't been formed.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. A couple things you said, like, I don't know your experience when I say that, and who has said that before. And I can think of even one time that stands out. And I was meeting with somebody, this is years ago, different church, but had kind of come to the church, was trying to get to know me, get to know him. But he wanted me to, it was almost like a schmoozing. It felt like to open up much faster than I was willing to within that space. And it was just kind of that, yeah, you could tell me anything. It's okay. I'm safe, And I was just like, immediately, like, you're the opposite of safe right now. Like, I don't trust a word that you're about to say, or that you would even take this and run with it, kind of a different direction. And so it's really, really fascinating. So when I read that, I just thought how often I do that. And it's not something I can declare, but it really is more, I think you talk about this more too. It's something that you set the tone for over time.
Yes. Yeah. And we're going to, over the next 3 months or the next couple of months in the Brave Conversations, we'll certainly go deeper in depth in that. But I would argue that safety, the presence of safety in relationship is going to be determined by the most vulnerable person. Right? That the one who has the least control of the rules, the one who has the least ability to modify, to speak up, to name things, they're going to be the ones who carry the most vigilance. That the person in a position of authority who actually gets to set the rules, therefore they create the predictability, they aren't as much at risk of being disrupted, of needing to be vigilant in that same kind of way. And so I always pay attention. Who's the most vulnerable person? Do they identify feeling safe? However, and this is the piece for us as we circle back into pastoral conversations and relationships, the challenge is a really well-intended minister can set the stage to create context, to grow into context that becomes safer communally, and yet themselves may never experience that same level of safety with their people.
Yeah.
Right? That in the same way that my kids should feel safer with me than I feel with them. Like that actually is how it's supposed to be. That if I feel safer with my kids than they feel with me, that's actually a breakdown in the family system.
Yeah.
And so our congregations, the people, our team members likely ought to feel safer with us than we feel with them, because we can hold things that maybe they're not holding. But the difficulty is being the person in leadership who then is probably higher vigilant levels than some, simply by the nature of people are growing and people are changing, and I'm trying to create room for that, and I want to help you, but that means that who you are today is not who you were 6 months ago. What you need from me as a boss or a leader or as a pastor is different than it was 6 months ago, and I'm always adapting. Or growth, now I hit on your pain point, and now instead of being really gracious and kind, you're now mad at me, and I'm the worst pastor ever. And the flip that goes that is unpredictable, we don't know where it goes, means that pastoring is not a very safe experience. It's not very relational, emotionally safe.
Yeah.
And this is why there's been some really great research on flourishing in ministry. And it was a project started by Matt Bloom out of Notre Dame that's now being continued by Dr. Chris Adams at Rosemead School of Psychology in Biola. And one of the wild things that hit me as I read this is in flourishing in ministry, one of the most significant components to flourishing is the relational experience that a minister has. And really what they're getting at is a relational experiences where there's a level of safety and security, where they can be as they are, who they are, can name things, can talk about things. But even more intriguing was that the most significant relationship is a peer relationship. Like a pastor's relationship with another pastor, in the depth of that relationship, in the safety of that relationship, was a greater predictor of flourishing in ministry even than spousal relationships.
That's interesting. Huh. That's why we started a podcast. That's why
you
think
right
about
there.
It. I mean,
there.
We're safe with each other.
Right. That's the invitation.
That's invitation.
That's the invitation.
You can't declare it, Chad.
Touche.
Yeah.
And so this is why I orient so much around like the human to human relationships that matter so much. It's because that place of security actually lays the foundation for flourishing. That outside, if we don't have those places of security and relationship where we can exhale, we can put down our vigilance, we will burn out because we will remain tense and anxious and try to power through for far too long.
Yeah. Wow.
Where did you learn, or where were you introduced to this concept of relational safety?
Yeah, so a lot of it has its roots in attachment theory. So if we think psychologically, which has to do with how humans flourish and how we're formed, but it really was Terry Hargrave's work that ultimately created restoration therapy that highlighted that it isn't just about like love and care for one another, but actually the experience of relationship itself that is the foundation. In some ways, we might draw the distinction of restoration therapy that I like to language this way: is there a security within myself? I trust me. That is a very different experience than security in relationship that I trust our relationship. And so a lot of Terry Hargrave has got a lot of work in some books around restoration therapy and created a whole treatment modality in therapy that I went through a whole certification process and learned how to use and operate. That was really where I deep dove into this concept for the first time.
I've heard you use this term a few times, and then outside of this, anyways. But I know in May, the Brave conversation that's going to be taking place is titled "Becoming Safer." So the R in the parentheses there. So why do you say it that way, and how is that different from actually being safe?
Yeah, so I think there's two reasons that I say it that way. The first is anytime we change anything, we become less safe temporarily. Right? I've had some pastors that I work with that'll come find me because they're like, hey, my staff says I've got some blind spots, I need to grow. And this pastor will come in and we'll do this work to help them grow and flourish and become a better leader. And then 2 months later, I'll hear from this pastor going, hey, I actually became the leader my team was saying they wanted, and now they're all mad at me. And it's so confusing. And what is happening? And I slow it down to say that you became the leader they always wanted you to be, which is a wonderful thing. At the same time, you are no longer the leader they knew you to be, which means that you've lost predictability, that they no longer know what to anticipate, that maybe they didn't like what they anticipated, that they were like, I can't bring this up because you're going to get mad at me, or you'll shame spiral, and so I'm going to withhold this, and actually you need to do some growing so we can be more honest with you. And then they went and grew, and now they can hold and receive those things. But now that person bringing that, going, oh, I think you can receive this now. You're not going to respond the same way, but also that's new and that's different, and different feels less safe inherently. And so to hold safety as a conclusion would require us to cease growing and changing. And that to me is not actually what we're after, which brings me to the other part of why I use the phrase safer, that I think we're at risk of creating safety as a false destination.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Is there like a safe way to become safer as we're in this journey?
I wish.
Okay. Podcast over.
Yeah. The language we use at Church Wilco is phrased this way, that when my bravery is met by your bravery, we actually become safer together. And we phrase it that way because it recognizes that actually safety is a byproduct. It's not something it's not like a house that I built and I'm going like, okay, it is done, it is there. It's something that emerges. It's something of life that begins to be found in the midst of a relationship where people are willing to take risks with each other, because safety ultimately is connected to experiences of trust. And while often we like to think in terms of extending trust to others, that's like, okay, I'm trusting you, I'm extending this to you. That is very different than I have experienced you as trustworthy.
Yeah.
And that trustworthiness, I experience you as trustworthy, that's something that's retrospective, that we've done something hard. I took a leap, you caught me. You took a leap, I caught you. Oh, I can trust you. And in that moment that follows the risks that was taken, what we experience is a development of safety. We are safer in the moment after. The difficulty is anytime I take a new risk with you, I don't actually know how you're going to respond.
Yeah.
Which means that if we've become friends and we've got 25 topics that we've dove deep into, but I have been wondering and thinking about something in the back of my mind that feels really deep and personal to me, and I haven't introduced this topic to you, right? Maybe we've talked about ministry, but we haven't talked about marriage. And I can wrestle with the challenges in ministry with you, and you have demonstrated trustworthiness to go in those conversations, to receive me well, to hold space for me, to engage back with me. And so the conversations of ministry have become safer. However, the conversation of marriage that we haven't entered into does not become safe because we had other conversations that became safe. That is still me taking a risk as I open up new places of conversation that temporarily feels dangerous and scary and difficult, which invites us to remember that safety is what we get to on the other side if my bravery in engaging was met by your bravery of meeting me there. now we have a growth in safety and we become safer.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's good. It's also reminded me why I don't talk politics to people much, because
it's not safe.
It's not
safe at all.
But here I want to circle back to this safer piece one more time, because I think this is a great example that we are running the risk culturally of having safety be something that we put on a false binary, that we identify something either as safe or it's not safe. Right? Kind of like I don't talk about politics because it's not safe. Like I've just concluded, and for good reason, right? You've got a lot of data that would suggest, by and large, this doesn't go well. But the difficulty, experiences, conversations, memories, pain,
people, anyway, humans.
Yes, correct.
Keep going.
Right.
Yes.
But safety isn't something that just exists or doesn't exist. Right? When we think about the relationships that we would identify in our lives as the safest relationships, have not always been the safest relationships. Because safety is something that we co-create together, that we build it up and we destroy it, and we build it up and we destroy it. Or things change and we lose some of it. We have to recreate it. That because safety is something that is co-created, the invitation for us as people, and I would say the invitation for us as leaders and pastors, is to actually acknowledge I need to help create the safe relationships that I long for. That I talk to a lot of people going, I don't know how to find safe people. And then they just don't have relationships. And the reality is safe people, you're not going to find safe people. You're going to cultivate safer relationships. But we cultivate them by taking risks, by taking one step at a time. And I'll say, little tangent, that one of the places this breaks down is we'll enter a relationship and go like, prove to me that you're safe. And so I want you to prove to me that you're safe. So I'll like dump all my stuff on the table. Like here's the biggest thing. Because if you can handle the biggest thing, then you can handle everything. Actually, that's not necessarily true. That just says that you can handle the big thing, but you may be terrible at handling the small things. I still don't know. But we do this. And then that person can't handle the big things. And we go, Matt, see, you're not a safe person. Let me go try somebody else. And we create these moments of friendship and relationship where we create our own problems because we haven't actually learned, because we haven't been taught how to intentionally cultivate brave relationships, which is I'm choosing to take a risk with you, you're choosing to take a risk with me, and then we assess how did that go? Where did it work? Where did it not work? Now we've become a little safer, and then we do it again over and over again. And I think the absence of these relationships are such a major factor of burnout for pastors.
Yeah. Becoming safer. How's that played out for you personally?
Well, I think even before I knew that I was doing this, I remember sitting on the back porch with a guy who was becoming my friend. And friendship had always been such a complicated thing for me. And I'm sitting on his back porch. We were youth leaders together way back in the day. And I looked at him, I was like, hey, just so you know, don't be offended if in 6 months I just kind of disappear from the relationship, because that seems to kind of be my pattern in friendship, that we'll go in, we'll enjoy it, and then something will happen and it will just kind of fizzle and I'll disappear. And I just named the thing, here's the risk, just so you know.
Okay.
And he could have responded, and he's like, well, if that's the case, I don't know if I want to start with you. We've been fair. Okay, I got it. I'm taking a risk. I'm just being honest in that way. And his response was, yeah, I don't think that'll work with me. And so he kind of made known at the beginning a little bit about how he operates. And functionally, what we said to each other was, we're going to have to see how this goes. The potential is there for friendship, but the potential is also there for things to break down. And practically, often when we're forming relationships, when we're hiring new staff members, when we're creating new small groups, what we tend to name are the possibilities of what could be that are beautiful. What we tend to skip over are the risks involved and why it might go wrong. And so practically speaking, to form brave relationships means to put on the table actually the risks that are there. Yeah. To give us some things to work with in that way.
Interesting. And that's I'm laughing because it's just not natural, because usually if somebody does that, well, they're just standoffish or
right.
a jerk. So
Yeah, this is how we planted our house church. Is we spent about 2 months sitting as a group in our living room going, why is this a bad idea? What could go wrong? Why do you not want to be part of a church? Why do we not want to start a church? Let's wrestle with what has church meant to us? What has family meant to us? What has friendship meant to us? Actually, none of us like any of those words because there's pain associated with all of those words. And in that process, we're telling stories that allow us to be known more deeply, but we're naming the risks that are there, which actually is us showing up and being brave with each other. And how people respond to our bravery, that determines so much about the safety that emerges.
So that's a really good segue, and we can kind of maybe land the plane with some of this leading into, and you can tell people how they can get connected to this as well. But in your progression within the relational safety, I think you called it Q1, right? Is it, the quarter basically? You talk about, you're exploring risk taking basically. Yes. And you said this a few times, but I mean, maybe pull out a little bit more or differently for us, the connection between the risk taking and relational safety. Because that, I mean, at the surface, those two, risk and safety, they kind of conflict a little bit.
Yes. And I would say that I actually think when many of us talk about safety, what we actually start practicing is avoidance. That because things feel risky, I don't bring it up, I don't talk about it. What I'm experiencing then is not safety, but the absence of conflict. Those are very different things. That when we're talking about relational safety, it actually means I can trust you to catch me. What it actually means is if we're in conversation and it doesn't go well, we're going to find our way back to each other. Like there's a security, not just on the front end, but confidence of where we'll arrive on the back end. And clinically, we talk about the idea of rupture and repair. That rupture, these places that relationship breaks down, and repair is how we rebuild them. And as a therapist, I train my therapist that actually to rupture and repair is better than to not rupture at all. Because what happens in the repairing and in the fixing and in the mending of the relationships, trust grows that says, okay, I don't have to be perfect. I can ask questions in the wrong way. I can tell stories you don't care about. My brain can go in directions and you lose interest, or you talk about things and I check out and you feel disconnected and it goes poorly, but you get to talk about it and name it and we get to find our way forward together. By and large, in our culture, if you misstep in friendship, you don't often get a second shot.
Canceled. That's right.
And so there's this pressure to say, don't ever break the relationship, which means that we just become more avoidant of risk. We don't become safer in friendship because safer friendships are those that say, you might hurt me. That is a risk in the relationship. I might hurt you, but we are going to talk about it and find our way forward together. And in that process of taking those risks around difficult things, safety is the byproduct of that. And so I would argue there is no experience of safety in relationship without the presence of risk. So to me, those are absolutely intertwined. And in our Brave Conversation series for Q2 2026, that's where we're unpacking more of this. We're actually going to create some spots to do some mini experiments with one another to wrestle with, to bring it not just into like cognitive information, but bring our own attention to how our bodies react to it, what our own history with these things are, because all of that plays into how we move forward.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you, BrianJames. This has been really, really, really great and insightful. And I'm excited that we get to keep partnering with you for these and further episodes coming as you move into new quarters and that kind of thing. Can you tell listeners how they can get connected with Church Wellco and these Brave Conversations?
Yeah, so simplest way is through the website, churchwell.co, so churchwell.co. And on the website, on the trainings tab, there's just a tab that says Brave Conversations. People can register for just one of the conversations. If they just see 1 month that's particularly intriguing, they want to test it out. They can also sign up just to be kept in the loop in an ongoing way. We've got a fun little community of brave leaders that are starting to engage with one another in these conversations, which really is the intention, that these would be spaces not just to hear information, but to wrestle together with the implications for these things within our own context and communities. So churchwell.co.
Awesome. And we will make sure If you didn't catch that and you're driving or something, we will make the link available in the show notes for this episode. Once again, thank you for being here with us. We're looking forward to more conversations with Brave Conversations and Churchwell Co.
Love that. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. If you'd like to connect with our guest, we have made ways to do so available in the episode show notes. And if you'd like to connect with us further, support the podcast, or sign up for show updates, just go to withouthatingit.com to get started. And don't forget to subscribe to Ministry Without Hating It wherever it is that you get your podcasts so you don't miss out on our future episode releases. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.